I'm Joe LeHotay. I'm with Pulse PEMF. I've been with Pulse for about the past 8 years. I have a background in business development and sales for about the past 25 years, mostly in healthcare, healthcare IT, and information sharing data across healthcare networks and things like that. And then for the past 8 years, I've been totally involved in sort of the other side of wellness and healthcare and biohacking and performance with pulsed electromagnetic fields.
Perfect. And I'm sure you're aware, Dubai is a wellness scene that's pretty booming right now. It has been for the last few years. I think it was 2 years ago that I came across your PMF device and utilized it and became an advocate of it and recommended it to clients, and you were super helpful at the time. But this was 2 years ago, and not many people knew about the device then. And even today, if I'm honest, it still feels like most people have never heard of it. So just for those that wouldn't know or don't know, do you mind just explaining what PMF is? And among our listeners, who would benefit most from using it?
Yeah, I mean, simply put, PMF stands for pulsed electromagnetic fields, and it's a modality that applies a safe pulsed magnetic field to the body, penetrating the body in different gradients. Some are very gentle, some are very low power, some are very high power, but potentially moving all the way through the body to exercise and energize depleted low energy cells of the body, just so that you can heal better and feel better is the quick way of putting it. But it really gives your body the energetic support at a cellular level, foundational level, that you need to resolve and heal and recover and perform your best and build the most resiliency in the body from an energetic standpoint.
I've heard you use this analogy many times, and actually something that I used with clients because it was the most simple way to describe it. And you relate it to that of your mobile phone device. Once it's fully charged and once it depletes in battery. Do you mind just sharing that analogy? Because I think that would really hit home on what you've just mentioned.
Yeah, appreciate it. I mean, our bodies are made up of trillions of cells. Depending on who you read, it might be 30 trillion, it might be 100 trillion, but it's trillions of cells. And each cell, if you want to think of them as batteries, as capacitors, they're meant to take in a charge and hold on to that charge, just like a battery would. And so if you sort of parallel yourself to your phone, and ask yourself, how many things can your phone do? Well, it can do myriad things, millions if you have all the apps loaded and things like that. But how many can it do if the battery's dead? Not too many, probably zero. And so think of yourself, since we're all made up of all of these cells, which are batteries, as also needing to take in a charge, be charged, hold the charge, and then utilize that charge, that energy, much in the same way as the phone does, in doing the myriad things that the body does. Mostly things that you aren't even aware of, you're not even conscious of. They're all sort of automatically happening in the background, and you want all those processes to be optimized and supported with enough energy at all times.
Nice. And just to paint the picture, could you describe what modalities you have, what devices you have, and how would one utilize these? Because I know there's the mattress that you have, and also the localized devices that you share as well for different reasons.
Yeah, so at Pulse, we deal with 3 full body accessories and then 5 or 6 focal accessories where you can apply them specifically to a smaller area of the body that's in question. And so our 3 full body accessories would be our full body bed, which I believe you're familiar with, our contoured bed. It sort of puts you in a position where your head is a little bit elevated and your legs are a little bit elevated. So it's really efficient contact impact of the PMF on the body, and it's head to toe and side to side, provides that therapy. We also have a sitting chair, which is sort of behind me. If people are viewing this, you can see a chair that you just basically sit in. It's an L-shaped pad that goes into that chair, and that provides energy to most of the body simultaneously. And now our newest full body accessory is our zero gravity lounger, or Z-Grav as we call it. And so that really puts people in a weightless position. It's a one piece, sits right on the floor. And it provides that PMF energy full body as well. And you're just in a really relaxed position. Our focal accessories include things like paddles and rings that are dual, that can be sandwiched front to back on a shoulder, or side to side or front to back on a knee, for example, or back to front on the hip. And then our square accessories are really point and shoot accessories of three various sizes. There's a 12-inch one, an 18-inch one, and a 22-inch one. And those are just for people of different sizes, and just applying those to either maybe your abdominal region or the hip flexors or the back of your head. Pulsing your head's very important. I'm not sure if you want to get into that, but the long and short of it is you can pulse or apply this PMF energy to the whole system at once by lying on or sitting on one of our full body accessories, or to a specific local area of question or pain or range of motion type issues, that kind of thing.
Wow. So there's a localized and there's more systematic devices that you have. And yes, we didn't plan to talk about the pulsing on the brain, but you reminded me of a client story who had visited Dubai. He was on holiday, I believe, and we're talking 2 years ago, and he was looking for your device in Dubai. So that's how he found us. And honestly, he couldn't say anything negative about your device, and he was using it predominantly for his head. I didn't go into the detail of what exactly he was recovering from or what he was treating, but he speaks volumes of, and it was that time then that I actually only ever considered that this could be safe to put on the head, in all honesty. So please share what information you do have and how it can benefit one, whether it's brain fog or whatever it might well be that you would like to share.
Yeah, I mean, if you just think about everything that goes on between here and here, that regulates and controls and supports basically everything the mind and body does. Not to get too scientific, too medical, too complex, but if you just intuitively think of everything that this part of the body does inside the head, what's in there? Is it better to have more energy in there or less? Is usually the question I ask. And everybody intuitively will always say it's always better to have more. And so if you're dealing with specific issues, or if you just want to bolster your mental clarity, your mental energy, it's a great idea to pulse your head. And, I would even go so far as to say that if you're using pulse or using PEMF and you're not applying it to the head, you're likely not getting the full possible benefit out of your PEMF strategy.
Okay, and that kind of leads to the next question, because could you describe what one would feel? Because you mentioned pulse, of course, it's the name of the device and your company, but what exactly is that pulse? And that will lead into my next question, because some people, I might as well share it now, some people do proclaim that they feel it in one area over another area, and perhaps why would that be?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's sort of the umbrella topic over that whole question is that there are a lot of PEMF devices on the market. There's a very broad spectrum of devices, and most people, I would even say 90% of people who are familiar with PEMF to any degree are familiar with the flavor of PEMF that is completely opposite of what Pulse provides. Okay. And so even if I run into people who see my hat and say, oh yeah, great, PEMF, we're very, we love it. 9 times out of 10, if I put them onto my system, they will be completely surprised and amazed on how different pulse is than the variety of PEMF that they might have had a background with or experience with. And so to your question about what is pulse and why do we call it that and what does that really mean, is that pulse is really described as more of what we call an impulse-based PEMF rather than what's known as a frequency resonant PEMF. Your frequency resonant PEMFs are the 90% in my estimation that people are aware of. They're what are usually referred to as a PEMF mat, where you lie on it, and you may have experienced this before. You lie on it and it feels like you're lying on a beach towel. So, you don't feel very much, which doesn't mean it's not doing anything, but most people equate a therapeutic sensation of some sort with actual work being accomplished from a customer standpoint. And so when I consult with businesses who are using this, like your facility in Dubai and, of course, the ones we have all over the United States and other places, we're usually talking about offering things that provide that sort of instant or near-term gratification where you're actually feeling a therapeutic sensation into potentially the area that you have a problem with, or even the whole body like we were talking about before. And I think the thing Pulse is famous for is not only the results that it gets with patients of all different sorts and clients of all different sorts, but that experience that goes along with it that really engages a user very, very early on in the process, even in the first minute of using Pulse. Yeah. And you'll agree with that. You turn it on and you turn it up. And once people feel that sensation, they know that something is occurring in their body to help support that healing. I hope that makes sense.
Makes total sense. And actually it was framed as another question because it does work wonders, and it claims to provide miracles. And of course, hearing firsthand from clients and experiencing it myself, it does. But there is skeptics out there, and you quite rightly said, similar to red light, I would say, that you perhaps don't feel anything immediate, so you question it, you become a skeptic. So how do you convince people that it's actually working, that perhaps don't feel anything initially?
Yeah, well, I would say, I mean, it goes back to, first of all, I've been doing this 8 years, and I've probably run this technology on probably 5,000 people or more, just, for quick demos at a conference or a demonstration and in my studio here, what have you. And I can honestly say and clearly state that I have never had a person who said, I don't feel this.
Okay.
They just don't exist.
Yep.
Now, the inverse of that are the 90% of the PEMF mats out there. I would say that I've run into very few people who report feeling anything on those mats. So it's a complete inverse, response to that question. And so what I would say to people who say they don't feel about anything on PEMF, they haven't tried the right one yet. Yeah. If they want to feel it, they should try something like Pulse, period.
Yeah.
End of story.
Great answer. And am I correct in saying that though you might be using Pulse to treat one particular thing, but it could be that you're feeling the sensation in a very different area on your body?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. And so just because you think you have an issue with something, and you might very well, there might be something else occurring in your body too that requires energy. And one of the big sort of engaging, I'll call it a wow factor of Pulse, if not maybe the biggest one, is that when someone's on it, they will feel something specific occurring. And again, it may be something they weren't expecting. They may be coming in for, something with their lower back, and all of a sudden one of their shoulders is responding more than their other shoulder. And they'll ask me, well, how does the machine know that this shoulder needs more energy than this one. Well, of course it doesn't know that. It's applying the same amount of energy to both shoulders. And it's your body sort of notifying you that it is absorbing the energy more in one side than the other. And so, that is one of the key ways that a user, a patient, a client, a member, whoever is using this device here will be engaged right from the beginning, not only feeling a sensation, but also potentially feeling it in a spot they weren't expecting to feel it, and learning something about themselves. And I think that it's super important whenever you're using any of these modalities, whenever you're walking into any type of wellness or biohacking or integrative clinic that is working with patients and clients, that it's super important for those proprietors, for those business owners, for those healthcare providers and wellness providers to have an ability to educate their clients about themselves every time they walk in there. Because people have a lot of options. They can rent from you or someone else. They can walk into someone else's facility for treatments. There's a ton of competition out there these days. And like you say, in Dubai, that business is exploding. In the US, it's exploding. And people really want to be able to create what I call a stickiness with their clientele. And so if there are opportunities to educate their clients on themselves each time they use one of their modalities, I think that's a key success factor.
No, I agree. And actually, that's the only way I could put something to it. And when I have experienced it and it highlighted an area that I wasn't too sure about, the only way that I could explain was that my body needed that. But I just didn't or wasn't aware of it. Now, not to say the PMF knew that, but as you quite rightly said, but it really felt that way.
But your body does. Your body knows it.
Yes. And
it tells you, and it feels like the machine knows it, but really, it's your body, and you're sensing that from your body's signals.
Okay, and on that, because with a pulse, it can be very light or it can be quite strong. Gain, is there a way to use this? Do you have to acclimatize to it, or would that come down to somebody advising you on how to utilize it based on your symptoms?
Yeah, it's super simple, and people do vary in their preference and then their sort of, I guess, tolerance for it. And so we speak in terms of low, medium, and high comfort. We always want users to be comfortable with the intensity of the magnetic field. But some people prefer a very aggressive feeling of work being done, and some other people prefer maybe a more feathery or light touch. And the thing about pulse is you can have really any setting you want, any variation of heavy and or light, or anywhere in between. So really you can dial in your specific preference on that. And I'm really more focused on people enjoying and being comfortable with the modality and using it consistently versus thinking they always need to use it at a specific setting. And maybe they don't prefer that setting. And so they don't necessarily look forward to their sessions as much as if they preferred it. I equate it to eating food. If you want to get the nutrition from a food, eat the ones you like. Don't feel like you're forced to eat food just because it's nutritious if you don't like it, because you won't eat it as often and you won't benefit from that nutrition. I look at pulse and PEMF as nutrition. And so I'm more concerned with people using it consistently than using it at a specific setting or rating, even if they don't prefer that, if that makes sense.
No, I agree. And talking of people utilizing it consistency so that it doesn't lose its novelty of any sort, this is safe to use at home and it doesn't need any medical supervision, correct?
Correct, yeah. It's purely a wellness device. We classify it as cellular exercise. And so it's basically stimulating the cells for better uptake and better elimination of toxins and things, and so that the body can basically have a clean slate to be able to heal itself and have more energy behind healing. So it's not a medical device. We don't necessarily even publish medical protocols for dealing with specific medical conditions. It's basically just infusing energy into the body so that the body can respond and heal itself.
And it sounds like, and I've heard you speak on other podcasts, this is somewhat the foundation to many other modalities that you might be considering. And you've shared how this can be combined with IV therapy, it can be combined with infrared sauna and HBOT. Do you mind alluding to each one of these and perhaps in which order you would do it and for what reason?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're energizing the cells, as we just previously said, that I feel that really anything else you're doing for your own wellness and resiliency strategy and recovery strategy, rehab strategy, those types of things are going to have more value and more success. I equate something like pulse. Think of your body as a garden. I equate pulse to being the fertilizer that you're using, first. And then seeds like HBOT and infrared sauna and IV therapy or regular nutrition or hydration or even movement that you're doing as seeds that will thrive more in a terrain that's been prepared with energy. In this case, I refer to it as fertilizer, but it's energy in the body priming the terrain for these other seeds that I'll call. And so if you're working with something like HBOT or infrared sauna, I would prepare the terrain with pulse prior to doing that.
Okay.
Because what is infrared sauna trying to do? Yes, it relaxes the person, but it's also attempting to extract toxins through the tissue so that someone can detox. If we exercise the cells open first, to take them from maybe being in a depleted, low energy state where they're holding in and locking in toxins to more open and receptive to expelling those toxins. Now the sauna's job is a bit more easy and efficient. You're getting more value out of that sauna. On the HBOT side, HBOT is trying to pressurize and put more oxygen into the cells. And so again, why not open those cells, make the body more receptive to that oxygen coming in, makes the HBOT more efficient, more valuable to folks that are doing that. And I don't mean you need to absolutely do it just prior to doing one of those other sessions, but maybe just be on a steady diet of pulse PMF to make sure you're always in that state of sort of better absorption and assimilation. The one I like even best, just because it not only improves the value, but it also is a huge time saver, is the IV therapy that you alluded to. So I'm literally leaving tomorrow for an event in Tampa that's an IV therapy based wellness event, and I'm providing 2 chairs for the IV lounge so that people can pulse while they're getting their IVs. And in that case, not only to the previous conversation around improved uptake and absorption and assimilation, but also time. IVs tend to run more quickly when you're in a pulse chair getting an IV. And if people are accustomed to certain types of drips, like a really popular one here, I'm not sure how popular it is around the world, but NAD Plus is a big drip in the US. It's a little more expensive. It's a cellular energy drip. It usually takes a few hours for someone to receive that drip, up to 4 and 5 hours even, because it's as it's going in, it's creating a lot of symptomology in most people where they just don't feel good. They get a headache, they get pressure in their chest, they feel nauseous, but they want to get to the end of that because they feel amazing at the end of it. Well, if you combine it with pulse, a lot of times those symptoms are really dramatically reduced. And so the drip doesn't have to be run as slowly. They can run it at a proper speed and a lot of times finish those drips in an hour and a half or even less than that. So It's really taking probably 30 to 50% or more off the time of running one of those drips. So we feel that that's pretty significant.
That would have been super useful. Just a client just last week had an NAD drip, and it was around 3 to 4 hours prior to going into a HBOT. So this would have been perfect if it's somewhat half in the time and you can increase the push.
Yes.
And I do like the idea of stacking for convenience.
For time. Yeah,
100%,
totally.
100%. Okay, talking of NAD, IV, HBOT, with the Pulse device, is there any way to quantify whether it's working or not? Would a live blood analysis be possible? I know that you've alluded to in your other podcast how you liken the blood being clunky, and then perhaps, as you quite rightly said, it re-energizes that cell, and etc., etc. So I'm just trying to find or investigate if there's a way to quantify this. Typical biohackers, they'll be wanting to
Yeah.
know. Subjectively, we know it works and we can share how we feel, but is there a way to quantify it?
Yeah, great question. And I think PMF has been around long enough, probably about 100 years in
Wow.
use on humans and animals. And so it's been really studied from A to Z. But I think one of the ways that people know most about is blood flow, circulation. And so if you look at before and afters of circulation, you'll find, again, with the, non-clinical clumpy term, you will find blood cells to be clumpy when we're low energy and, just hit with
Stress.
toxins and pollution and stress and everything that the world and our lifestyles throw at us these days. It's really not friendly to circulation, and delivering oxygen to the endpoints for healing. But there have been lots and lots of before and afters with circulation, looking at blood analysis, before and after PMF, and the blood flow really does circulate. And so I think that's a big one. I think with Aura rings and Whoops and other easy wearables to monitor HRV and monitor sleep and monitor, respiration and heart rate and all of that over time, you can certainly see improvements with that. So as more and more of those technologies come out, I think it's easier and easier for the regular everyday person to be able to track some of those things with PEMF for sure. But the great thing about PMF and the great thing about a PMF-like pulse is that there are so many subjective findings and, real life stories and experiences by personal users that I find that as you have the subjective testimonials and experiences, the need for objective, some people might still want to have the data and the numbers and the studies and things like that. And although they all exist, they become a little bit less important when there is so quick of a change in someone's own personal experience. And so I just encourage people that if they haven't tried something like Pulse before, that's the first thing that should be on their list to check off in terms of their biohacking and long-term sort of generational wellness strategy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing. And talking of getting this in front of more people, we alluded to it earlier with one of the first questions, but who would this be typically for? And this kind of leads on to the part of my question, which is, in your experience, what do you think the main reasons are for why therapists perhaps are not actively incorporating this more? Or maybe they are, and I'm oblivious to it here in Dubai in particular.
Let's see. Well, I mean, I could probably speak most in the second question to the fact that personally, our company has existed in the US for about 18 years. And so we do have a lot of momentum in the US. It's still not as, given the results that it gets and the success people have with it, both from a user and clinical results, personal experience standpoint, and also a financial and, in a wellness business standpoint. Given all of the success around both of those, avenues, it is still fairly under the radar, even in the US and even after being around for 18 years. And that's, I think, maybe on us a little bit for not, putting the marketing behind it necessarily. A lot of our growth is word of mouth, and it has been. And so my clients will have a patient who wants to have this at home. they'll get in touch with me. My baseball players in the major leagues here in the US will start using a system and then talk about it with their team and talk about it with other players. And so a lot of our growth comes from word of mouth. I think to your question on why people, so aside from just not being aware of it, people that are aware of it that may not implement it for whatever reason, I think one of the biggest reasons about that is I think a lot of people overthink it. And I think a lot of people overcomplicate PEMF, and they think that it requires, a really detailed and complicated educational process, and they just don't necessarily understand it. And maybe that comes from never hearing of it before and just wondering why it can get such great results. How can it be so easy? And how can I just think of this as, not necessarily a black box? It does require a little bit of education to it for some of the systems, like a pulse system, probably perhaps. But I think people just overcomplicate it. Even people that are clients that have had it for a while, come back with questions that, it just shows that they're not applying it in a very simple and consistent way. And I think that if you just use that as your overarching strategy to just make sure people are using it consistently, like I said before, with settings that they enjoy, I think it will be a success. And we have, myriad places that are very, very successful with it for those reasons. They just think of it as that nutritional component that they don't need to overcomplicate. So I hope that answers your question to some degree.
No, I believe so. And I think if going back to your point of it being quite passive, and if you can stack it with something else that you're typically doing in a day, why not at least try it? And if all else has failed, then at least give this a go.
Yeah. And you also had asked about people who use it and for what purpose. And so I think really, kind of the wise guy answer would be anybody with cells should use this. Okay. And so people, animals, just get on it and use it. Who doesn't need more energy in their life? And I equate it to Tiger Woods. For 20 years, he was the world's #1 golfer and better than anybody else. But every day during that 20 years, if he wasn't playing a tournament, you would find him at his home course in Florida practicing for 8 to 10 hours every single day. He's already the best. He can always get a little bit better, was his answer. Right?
Yep,
he always needed to be a little bit better. And with cellular energy, it's a very similar answer. Even if you're a high performer, if you're well, if you're unwell, or a high performer, you can always use more energy. And so even if you're not digging yourself out of a hole of pain or range of motion or illness of some sort, even if you're not in that situation and you just want a slight razor's edge to your long-term resiliency and competitiveness, if you happen to be maybe a professional, look at something like Pulse to provide that energy and that slight edge. So really, I think it's for everybody who doesn't have a contraindication, and that would only be people with implanted medical devices like pacemakers and anything electronic like that, to pregnant women, to people who have had organ transplants. But anybody else should get on Pulse and give it a try, and you'll be really impressed with the results, I believe.
I'm sure. And you reminded me of another client story. Not as spectacular as Tiger Woods, but he actually used the PEMF device on his horse, his racing horse. Seen a ridiculous results with a horse. I believe it would have started winning of some sort because he was raving about it, and then he seeked it out for himself. He actually did a research, and is PEMF actually okay for humans to use? And that's also how he found out about the device in Dubai.
It's
me the
really
story.
interesting too. It's really interesting too because yeah, there's something about a $5 million racehorse that you don't want to ever be in pain and unable to race, right? So that's one thing. But the other thing about using it with animals is that there's no placebo, and so if a horse is in pain and limping, and then you put them on pulse or put them on PEMF, and a day later or 2 days later they're not limping anymore, there's no placebo effect there. And so, that's a major concern for people too with wellness modalities. Am I only feeling better because there's a placebo effect? Well, we've proven that, it's used on animals. And so it's really impacting that cellular function and that healing for sure.
And I just have to ask these questions just for those that are watching this. I'm sure they have them, but why we have it, and I'm sure you're sick and tired of answering these over and over again. But for those that have the question of EMF, do I get affected by EMF? Of course, being part of PEMF, and
Sure.
then also what's stopping me from? Is it quite similar to grounding? Yes, there's a ton of sand here in Bali, but it's also a lot of concrete. So
Yeah.
does it work in the same way as grounding, earthing, and also should one be careful of if it is emitting any EMF?
Yeah. Let's see. I could take the second one first. Grounding. I'm a huge fan of grounding. My feet are literally on a grounding mat right now. Lots of EMFs from the screen, lots of EMFs from my light over here. So to your point, yeah, it's something that you want to defend yourself against because it doesn't get any less as society evolves with the technology and all of that. And so there are studies out there that show that PEMF can even help mitigate the effects of that radiative EMF. So it's a great question. It comes up all the time in conversations. There have been studies done. I have heard speakers on the topic. I've seen presentations on the topic. And really the reason is because PEMF is generally extremely ultra low frequency. The devices with pulse run between 1 and 10 hertz, 1 and 12 hertz, single low double digit hertz. The devices that are emitting the radiative EMFs are usually in the thousands or millions of cycles per second, hertz per second, which is super fast and frequencies that they're aberrant to the body, they're foreign to the body. The body doesn't know how to process them necessarily, but very low frequencies are friendly to the body. The body has, basically humanity has been on the planet, has been used to these frequencies. The Earth emits different frequencies, but the one that's most commonly talked about is about 7.83 hertz, the Schumann resonance. And so right in that wheelhouse between 1 and 10, single and low double digits, and even maybe triple digit frequencies are where you'll find most PMFs. And the grounding comparison is, think of something like pulse as just heavy duty clinical strength grounding. And it's a grounding that you can feel some of the same benefits, but it's a therapeutic sensation. Whereas the 90% mats we talked about earlier are literally providing those frequencies like grounding, where you don't feel it, you're still getting some benefits, like we said earlier, but it's imperceptible for most people.
Okay, thank you, Joe. I'm glad we cleared that
Sure.
up. And Joe, to finish, please, how can people find out more information about yourself? Where should we send them to? Socials, websites, please.
Probably my biggest place, well, I have a few, but my biggest place is probably Instagram at LeHotay Joe, where I publish a lot of content, easy to understand language about PEMF. I don't like to overcomplicate things, as we said earlier. This is something that everyone can understand and everyone should try, whether you're a consumer or a business owner. And I like to provide educational clips and posts that help do that. You can also find me on LinkedIn at just my name. And you can find me on Substack at PEMF Joe. So I publish a newsletter that helps people navigate shopping for a PEMF device, implement a PEMF device. I usually put my event calendar in there. So if someone wants to come and try Pulse, it's something that everyone should try at some point. especially if they're considering purchasing it. And so I put my calendar in there. We're at events around the US all the time. Those are probably the best places to find me. And yeah, thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Joe.